The reduced storage PS5 has been silently released, so here's what you need to look for. After that, let's talk about how the PS4 is back, but Sony is hiding something with all these updates. And finally, while a lot of people think that the PS5 handheld is going to hold PS6 back, it's actually PCs that should get most of the blame. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. I hope you're having a great week. I am still working my way through Borderlands 4, suffering through these performance issues. I'm also playing Sniper Elite Resistance. I turned off the assist that puts a reticle in when you hold breath. It makes it so much harder, but that much more rewarding. So let me know what you're playing down in the comments below. But let's get into the first news story here, because the whole situation surrounding the reduced storage PS5 is interesting. A lot of people were saying that it was a rumor, and for a little while it was, but it's not like a rumor where it's coming from someone at Sony who told their friend who told Bill Coon. It was showing up on shipping manifest. It was showing up on order sheets. Like, Sony clearly made this thing and put it into production and was ready to sell it. And that's what caused leakers to notice. And the only reason we heard about it from leakers is because Sony never really announced it. They confirmed it when they were reached out to, but they never came out and explicitly said, hey, we've got to reduce the storage of the PS5 back to what it was in the launch unit before we upgraded it to 1 terabyte in the PS5 Slim. And I don't like that practice. Obviously, I think it kind of blows to reduce storage when 1 terabyte seemed like so much back in the PS3 and PS4 days. And now, I mean, if you have a 1 terabyte machine, knowing that you have to install every game you want to play, whether it's digital or on disc, you're going to fill up a terabyte extremely quickly. And it's not like even with the terabyte version, you get the full terabyte. They have to leave space left over for the operating system and all the system files and everything like that, and all your saves. So really, you're only getting around 850 or so usable gigabytes to begin with. So if you reduce the cap down to 825 or whatever it is, you're going to end up with less than 800 usable storage space. And that's just like not enough. Like, that's basically equivalent to what we were working with back in the PS4 days when they released with 500 gig hard drives, because games have gotten so much bigger and you have to install all of them to the internal storage of the system. I don't want to shill for Sony, but I understand why they're doing this. They have to save money in any way that they can to keep the price where it's at because of inflation, because of tariffs, because of everything else. That's a huge reason why we've seen the PS5 price increase so much. And we've gotten the price increases here in the United States, but over in Europe, where this console is being sold, the situation is a lot worse and the price increases have happened multiple times. So they're doing literally everything they can to keep the cost low, which I definitely support. I just wish they could have figured out a different way to do it when you already have 2 versions of the console, one with a disk drive, one without. You have the slim model, which you can fit in a smaller box, which means you can fit more of them on a ship. They've reduced the weight of the PS5 multiple times, so maybe they've literally done everything they can to reduce the cost of making one PS5 to the point where their only option left is to go back into a stockpile of these SSDs from the launch units that they had laying around and start soldering those onto the motherboards of PS5 Slims instead of buying a whole new batch of SSDs to do that with that are a full 1 terabyte. And thankfully, it looks like they're accounting for this for the next generation, because all of the rumors we've heard about the PS6 is that it's going to be a more conventional console. It's going to be a box instead of a weird oblong shape that doesn't look good vertically or horizontally. Like, I like that Sony went outside of the box with the PS5. They made it look futuristic. They made it look to some people cool, but really, I think it's a, 50-50 at best experiment, and most people would say it wasn't a great experiment. It looks cool. It's just like, if it's going to make the thing cost more money, I don't think it's worth it, and I don't really care what the console looks like, because when it's on, I'm not staring at the console next to my TV or in my entertainment center. I'm hopefully staring at the TV while I play some games, right? Like, it looks cool, but it didn't need to look cool. Thankfully, it's not a widespread issue just yet. There's still a lot of stock out there of the regular PS5 Slim with 1 terabyte, mainly because they did a lot of bundles. I mean, there's a FIFA bundle, I'm pretty sure, in Europe. There's Astrobot bundles, there's Call of Duty bundles, there's Horizon Forbidden West bundles. So like, yes, it's annoying that you have to go a little bit out of your way to find one of these PS5s that doesn't have reduced storage, but it's good that they're still out there in the wild and you can still readily buy them. So if you don't have a PS5, I don't think it's a rush scenario, because there are a lot of PS5s on store shelves. I mean, I went to Best Buy the other day and the whole shelf was packed with PS5s. I don't think that means they're selling less of them. I'm sure they took a little bit of a hit after the price increase, but it seems like they finally caught up with the manufacturing in the sense that they're making more PS5s than they actually need at this point, and I think that's good. Also, the reduced storage PS5 is easily identifiable. They have the amount of storage that the console has printed on the box. It has a different box box that has black packaging. So look for a black box if you're going to buy a PS5. Don't pay more for less storage. Pay more for the storage you are already getting. It started in Europe. I'm assuming that once they sell through all of the stockpiled regular PS5 Slims that have 1 terabyte of storage, they'll start just making every PS5 the reduced storage one, and then it'll start moving its way over to the United States and other territories. So if you're in Europe, be aware. If you're in the United States, make sure you're checking the box when you pick up a PS5, because Sony's not announcing this change. They're just throwing them in stores and leaving it on us to figure out what they've done. So like, you just got to be aware. It's a bummer, but you know, it's a solvable problem for now. But moving on to the second news story here, we did get a big PS5 update this week. I covered it in the last news video. The first big thing that came along with it was being able to save multiple Bluetooth connections to your DualSense controllers, DualSense and DualSense Edge, which is great if you use it on multiple devices like I do. The second big update is that it came along with a low power mode, and there's a list of supported games, which is actually growing pretty quickly. So like your PS5 will sap less power from the wall. And honestly, before I was like, whatever, who cares? It's using less energy. Like I pay my electric bill every month, but like, dang, electric bills have gotten absolutely nuts. So if I'm using my PlayStation 5 Pro, honestly, like using the low power mode in any case where it won't reduce performance, I want to be using it because I want to save money on my electric bill. It is getting absolutely nuts over here. But in addition to the PS5 update, they've updated everything across the board. The DualSense got an update, the Pulse Elite got an update, the Pulse Explorer got an update, and the PS4 got an update. Now, interestingly, it's not the security updates they've been doing over the past few years or so, where every time there's a milestone reached in the jailbreak of the PS4, they look at what these hackers have figured out and they rapidly get together a patch to push out to stop the PS4 from being jailbroken. It's not one of those. They've actually improved some readability features on the PlayStation 4, but you know, they've always done this where they say an update does one thing and then a couple weeks later we get a bigger update for all of the different things that they updated first. And I think that's what they're doing here, because this is one of the most widespread across the entire ecosystem updates we've gotten on the PS5, PS4, Pulse Elite, Pulse Explorer, and DualSense since the thing came out. We used to get big ones a couple times a year during the first couple of years of the life cycle that improved a lot of features and added more features, but over the past couple of years, what they've done is just throw out features in small updates throughout the entire year. I prefer that. I'd rather them not sit on big updates and just release features as they make them, like the Welcome Hub, this low power mode, the Bluetooth update for the DualSense, and everything else. But I'm curious what it is they're working on, because they usually don't update everything across the board at the same time and not tell us what it is about. With the cadence we're in with the PS4 now, it's exactly where I want it to be, you know, getting small security updates, no new games. They're not prioritizing making their first party develop for PS4 anymore. It looks like a lot of third-party developers are catching on to the PS4 kind of being moved on from. I think it's well past time for the PS4 to die. So when you start seeing these really tiny updates that don't really do anything, it's just a good sign that they're heading in the right direction to actually, you know, produce games for the generation we've been in for 5 years. But you know, there are still a lot of people playing on PS4, whether Sony likes it or not. So like, they shouldn't abandon those people and allow their consoles to completely break down. And somehow, some way, it seems like Capcom is going to figure out how to get Resident Evil 9 up and running on the PS4. I think that's kind of the Switch 2 effect, because the Switch 2 is kind of equivalent to the PS4's power. So if they're going through all the work to port a game over to the Switch 2, they're going to turn around and say, hey, maybe we can also port it over to the PS4 as well. As long as the first party isn't continuing to support PS4, I think we're sitting pretty here. Like, I understand that, you know, these games are getting more and more expensive. You've got to maximize the amount of copies that you actually sell across everything you can possibly port it to, just to make sure that you get as much profits as possible. So that's really what they're doing with the PS4. And the fact that they're porting games over to it in the first place kind of proves that there's enough people still playing on it where, you know, it's worth it for them to port a huge new next-gen game like Resident Evil 9 that's using the next-gen version of the RE engine. You know, it just proves that there's enough people there to make it worth it to do that. So I'm not necessarily so curious about what this update did for the Pulse Explorer, Pulse Elite, DualSense, and PS Portal and PS4. I'm curious what they're putting stuff in place to update later, because it seems like they really are working on something to have an ecosystem-wide update go out all at the same time. But that brings me to the third news story here. So a lot of the conversation around the PS5 handheld and the chip that it's using is that it's going to create an Xbox Series S situation when it comes out, in the sense that it's going to hold developers back when they're making new games, and we're not going to see them maximizing the potential of the PlayStation 6 and achieving its true power. A lot of people are doing that in retaliation for all the complaining about the Series S, where developers were complaining about having to develop for it. And I think the key difference between that and the PS6 handheld is that it doesn't look like Sony's going to really have a hard locked rule in place that says if you are shipping a PS6 game, it also has to be playable on the dockable PS6 handheld. Whereas with the Xbox Series S, Xbox had a very firm rule that if you were shipping a game on the Xbox Series X, you also had to make sure it worked well on the Xbox Series S. They bent the rules a couple of times for games like Baldur's Gate 3 and I think a couple of others, but for the most part, they have stuck to that rule. And I think if more Xboxes got out there in general, more developers would be prioritizing the Series S, but because the ecosystem's so small, they see it as a hindrance, right? They're like, oh, we got to make sure that these games run on this thing that's basically a beefed up Xbox One, and they really don't like having to do that. And it comes down to the memory, so it doesn't seem like that's going to affect Sony next generation, and I think the blame is being misplaced because it's not consoles that are holding this stuff back, it's actually PCs. And I have to explain this because if you hear that, you're like, what? There's like $4,000 PCs out there that can run all these new games that run poorly on consoles at like max settings, 4K, 120 FPS. What's the deal? Well, those parts are extremely expensive. I just mentioned that a PC with those parts would be like $4,000. And if you're not a PC gamer, we know what most PC gamers are using because Valve does a hardware survey every few months where you basically click OK, it logs the parts you're using in your computer, and then they share those results. And it turns out that the most widely used graphics card across Steam is a basically 50-50 split between a 4060, a 4060 Ti, and a 4060 laptop. And the 4060 is a decent card for sure, but the PS5, the card it's working with, if you compared it to a PC, is stronger than what you'd see in something like a 4060. It's basically a 1080p card that right now, with where games are going with Unreal Engine 5 and everything like that, is basically targeting medium and low settings at 1080p with around 50 to 60 FPS. So it's a little bit weaker than what you see in the PS5. And if developers are starting to develop their games on PC and then porting them to PS5 later, their benchmark target is always going to be that 4060. And as long as the 4060, which is basically the cheapest card that's usable that you can get from Nvidia, is the default card that gamers are using on PC, that's going to be the benchmark target for whatever game is being made. So even if the PS6 comes out and runs laps around the 4060, as long as it has that foothold where it's the most used PC graphics card, that's what's going to hold developers back, not the console that traditionally would back in the day. And unfortunately, there's no quick fix for this. Like, you have to get PC players to upgrade, and getting them to do that is obviously extremely hard because with every game using Unreal Engine 5 and being basically unplayable on 4060 cards, they're not really upgrading. Like, the developers over at DICE are prioritizing these low spec PCs for Battlefield 6, and while that is a benefit because the game's going to run great on the PS5, if a third-party game is prioritizing every platform, you're just going to see games scaled back to fit on those older pieces of hardware, and that's a huge bummer. So I know that because of the Xbox Series S sentiment, there is a sentiment out there about the PS6 handheld. We don't even know if it's real, also, like I have to point out, but if it does become real and the leaks do come true, I don't think there's going to be much to worry about, and what we should be worrying about is PC gamers. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.